Okay, we'll turn it over to you. And get with it, North Carolina. I remember you got a North Carolina connection there. Here you go.
All right, good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce to you, we have two speakers this morning, and we'll begin with Dr. Bruce Locklear. Some of you know Bruce as a fellow Rotarian. We're going to see if we can kind of kindle that spirit and get him back here where he belongs. But Bruce was, he came into my life as the principal of Edina High School. That's when I first met him. And that may be when many of you first met him as well. He is now spending a good deal of his time with an organization called TreeHouse, which if you haven't heard about it, you're going to learn about TreeHouse today. I went and spent some time at their learning center in St. Louis Park, and you go away with a deeper understanding of not only the world we live in, but the amazing efforts of organizations to improve that world. And so Andy Swanda will join Bruce during the presentation, but we welcome both Bruce and Andy, and we'll start with Bruce.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back. It was an affectionate accosting when I walked in this morning by Jack Rice. And then my friend Paul said, "Why'd you jump ship?" And I was principal at Edina High School for 10 years. And it was 10 of the most wonderful professional years of my life from 2007 to 2017. And was blessed to do some phenomenal things with a lot of phenomenal people. And God puts you where he wants you at a certain time. And I think that's where I was supposed to be. And when that time concluded, I had to make some decisions. But it wasn't the success that we had. And during that 10-year span of time, we were recognized numerous times as a model school, a top performing school in America. But that was all fine and dandy. But that paled in comparison to the relationships that we had there. Relationships with students, relationships with faculty and staff, and relationships with parents. And that's what made that school work. And so in my 10-year tenure there, that's what we spent a lot of time doing, is building relationships. And when I leave things, I tend not to look back, and that was probably one of the hardest things that I did. But it was a great time to look at a transition out. And so Mary asked me to talk briefly about what I've been doing since that retirement in 2017. If you were to ask my wife, Dawn, she'd say I'm failing miserably at retirement, which is what it's supposed to be. When I retired, I started a consulting group called Locklear Educational Services. And when I transitioned out of Edina, I went straight into Jostens Corporation and did a lot of work with their sales reps and their executive teams on building and developing leadership. And that was a tremendous opportunity. And so I spent a year engaged with them. And then I had a good friend at a local charter school who needed some help and support. So I spent a year serving as the superintendent of that charter school and upper school principal, just helping them set up some organizational systems and structures. And then 2 years ago, I was asked to go out to Woodbury to work with a small private Christian school as their head of school. So I spent 2 years working there, and again, developing strategic plans, aligning the strategic plan to the outcomes, and just doing all kinds of leadership and administrative items. And it was a lot of fun. But probably the most exciting thing that I've done, I was asked to teach at Southwest Minnesota State University. So I'm a full-time professor for them now, and I run the administrative licensure program for budding principals who are currently teachers. And then the most exciting news is we are just starting a learning community for teachers to gain their master's degree up in Red Lake. And it has been the most phenomenal experience of my life. And so my first meeting was 2 weekends ago, and we've got 17 teachers who work in these schools on the res. And And I thought I'd be going in, working with these teachers who were angry and burned out and just complaining. And within the first hour of the class, they were talking about, this is the greatest job that I've ever had. And I want to die in this job. I want to spend my entire career here. And I had that look of shock on my face. It's like, excuse me, that's not what I expected. And I asked him, I said, why is this so special? And the series of teachers that I was talking to, she said, the kids struggle mightily, but at the end of the day, they all have a little bit of hope. And it's my job to help bring that hope out. And it's like, okay, I just got schooled on developing a little better attitude when you go into a new environment like that. And so it's been phenomenal. And so just been richly blessed to do a lot of different things in a lot of different ways with a lot of different people. So still doing a lot of consulting on the side with a couple of private people and then 2 organizations, and then doing the teaching full time. But probably the most important thing that I've been engaged with is still serving youth. When I retired, I had a lot of opportunities to serve on boards. And so my wife and I spent a lot of time talking about what boards would we select. And we agreed to do just one. And the one that I chose to do was TreeHouse. And for obvious reasons. TreeHouse is an organization that serves teens who are hopeless. And it's our job to help them find and discover hope. And one of the things that I'm not telling you anything new, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but this past couple of years for our students has been utter chaos. And you can point to any direction and call it. I mean, it has been some political division that we've been facing. It's social unrest. It's pandemic concerns. Do I wear a mask? Don't I wear a mask? What, am I going to get, I mean, all of these things. I've still been engaged with kids since I retired. And this is the reality. And the thing that we know now, more so than ever before, school has been flipped upside down. The way we used to do school versus how we do school moving ahead, it ain't going to be the same. And so our job is to begin to ask the question, what's working right and well, so that we can discover those things and help move ahead to make sure that we're serving our students to the best of our ability. And the state of today's youth, I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading this to you, but students are just in a time of questioning. And you compound questioning with, I may not make it, or a lack of hope. And we got some issues. We have an entire generation of students who will come out of this COVID, and they're navigating periods of time in their lives where they were isolated, they were insecure, and they were afraid. And you think about as adults, how we navigate those emotions in our lives. I'm not very good at navigating those things. Then you cast out upon a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old who is trying to grow up in the midst of all of this. They need a lot of help, and they need a lot of support, and they need a lot of love. But the most important thing is that we're seeing is that there's a lack of relationships with students. And with this whole isolationism, it has called that out to a degree that is unparalleled. And so how do we continue to help build relationships? I've done a lot of research over my career as a principal and a professor, but the number one thing that we know about student success is that if you can put one caring adult in the life of a child, that child's likelihood of success is off the charts. So how do we do that? How do we find that one caring adult? And for me, it's been TreeHouse, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is to help students graduate. But we want to help students graduate in a way that they feel loved, they're capable, they're worthwhile, and they have a sense of hope. And so TreeHouse has been something that I have worked with. I'm the assistant board chair, whatever I am. I hang out with this group of people twice a month and work with the staff closely. And it's an organization that is designed to change lives. And I wanted to have Andy come in today at Mary's request to talk more about TreeHouse globally. So I'll bring Andy up. He's the brains of the outfit, and I'm the brawn. So
Cool, thanks.
yeah.
And thank you guys. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, back of the room. Good morning. All right, just making sure. It's a blessing to get to do this with Bruce, and it's a blessing to get to do it in Edina. So my role is Vice President of Development, so fundraising. And what's fun is I get to tell stories. I mean, that's what I get to do. I get to tell the story of TreeHouse, and especially here in Edina, because so I have two children that graduated from Edina in 2020, and I have another two that are about to graduate this coming spring. And, you know, Bruce mentioned emotions. All right, so this is going to be a tough one for some of us. Go to age 17, probably your junior year in high school. Maybe it was in Muscatine, or I know, Paul, we said you were in Edina. So picture your world, your personal world as a junior in high school. Picture your family life, so who you lived with, your friends, who you hung out with, your activities, the things that you did, some of the things that they didn't define you, but they were part of your characteristics, whether they were on your letter jacket or they became kind of your high school resume. On a given day or week, how did you feel? Just think about like some of those, man, as a junior in high school, I felt blank. All over the place. There's going to be a lot of different emotions in there. But when I think about that at 17, sometimes, man, I felt really loved. I had a good mom, stepdad, grandparents. That was my circle of support. I had some good friends. I felt pretty accepted. I was a liked kid. Felt pretty accomplished. Some sports stuff went well. Felt pretty smart. But then I also realized, you know what though? I also felt really uncool. I felt sometimes really discarded. All of a sudden, that girl that things were going great, she decided they weren't going great anymore. Really disappointed and uncertain when the sport that I was betting a lot of hopes on, all of a sudden one injury, that goes away. Not certain about my future anymore. What are some of your words? So there's a word every week at TreeHouse. We unpack emotions with teens in support group in a safe setting. And it's amazing when you have teens ages, whether they're 13 or 18, saying, wow, this week I felt, fill in the blank. I don't know if I could have done that as a teenager. It truly and vulnerably shared, here's how I felt this week. And here's what happened this week that made me feel that way. I wish I'd have had that as a high school student. I need that now as an adult and as a parent. But I'd encourage you to take away, what are those things? So there's multiple words at TreeHouse that we do listen for. And one of those words, Bruce said, is hopeless. What happens when a teen says, I feel hopeless? Because for that, that's an alarm bell. When the word is hopeless, we would argue potentially all bets are off in what's happening in this young person's life. So over the last couple of years, we really unpacked all of our mission, our branding, the way we talk about TreeHouse, and we scraped any mention of at-risk teens or at-risk families or hurting youth. Teens are hurting, yes, but we said, no, but what does it mean when a teen feels hopeless? Because every teen that you know has or will feel hopeless, and a lot of us in this room as adults, we also know what that feels like. But when you're a teen, you might not have the coping skills to go through that. So our whole mission is end hopelessness among teens. So when we went through this project, this was about 3 years ago, and we asked teens to describe, how would you unpack what hopelessness feels like? They came up with that. So we just call it the Numb. And our teen said, well, it feels like I'm on the inside and there is no way out. It's just a tangled mess. And that's what this, and that's what this feels like. There is no way out of it. And that's where our adults, it takes an adult, wants to be willing to help get into that and tell them, it's okay, I'll sit in this with you as we walk out. So I already mentioned coping skills between brain development, emotional development, whether it's just we have experiences under our belt. As adults, we're better able to handle hopelessness as much as it is difficult and it hurts. But for teens, I mean, if a teen gets stuck here, it could have significant impacts, obviously, on their future family, future career, future education, future opportunities. That's why we want to intervene early. And so for us, then there's kind of a second image. Well, what if over time, and it takes time, we can walk with a teen long enough where the knot, it starts to untangle a little bit and it starts to unravel. It still will flip back upon itself, but over time, not only there's an arrow, which means there's a direction, and at the end, it's going up just a little bit. There's a positive trajectory, and it goes from darkness and hurt to optimism, and there is light ahead. So for us at TreeHouse, we talk about two things, and I love right here. Is it the truth? For a teen, so many of the things, like when you're 16, 17, that thing that you're feeling, you can say like, this is it, this is the end, this is the defining thing. Well, yeah, but is it true? Let me sit in that with you. And then we also want to walk alongside teens, but what is also possible for who you are and who you are becoming. So we have three things, and I love, there's the 4-way rotary test. We have the 3 TreeHouse truths. And it's one thing when adults say these to teens, I kid you not, because you're gonna think like, there's no way kids would say this to one another. When teens at TreeHouse remind each other of these things, it just blows your mind. They remind each other of these 3, that I'm lovable, capable, and worthwhile, that I'm loved without strings, and never alone, and that I have a future. Because we want to, as adults, lovingly drill into teens these 3 things. Right now, this is how you feel, yes, but we want to remind you, but these 3 bigger things, these are true about you. I'm lovable, capable, worthwhile, I'm loved without strings and never alone, and that I have a future. And our teens consistently repeat these to one another. So at TreeHouse, I'll speak about sites in a second, where they are and how many we have, but we have 4, I would say, core programs. So every TreeHouse that we operate has support group and mentoring. And support group, I was never exposed to a true support group. You know, there were small groups, maybe at school. In my church, we did small group Bible studies, and there were these different things. But a TreeHouse support group it would be a group of about this size, and there's an adult just helping moderate. Everybody checks in, you share your names, you share 5 emotions that you felt this week. And if you want to share what happened this week, that's up to you. But it is beautifully rigid, structured, and then teens share support and encouragement for one another. They're not there to try and fix it. They're just there to say, man, I've been there. I'm in this with you. And then mentoring is that one adult alongside one team. Some are staff, and some are trained volunteers. We're pretty rigorous in how we're going to train any adult to walk alongside teens, because some of the things we walk through are brutally, brutally hard. My wife and I was crunching the number. We've made, I would say it's either between 6 and 8. I call them 911 calls. Some, unfortunately, to you and to your department around things happening in some of our kids' friends' lives that our kids were becoming aware of. And they said, Mom, Dad, I don't know what to do with this. And we said, well, we're going to call the parents. And when we couldn't reach the parents, we had to call 911. They were suicide. They were a brutal self-harm. They were severe eating disorders. And these were kids that if you walked by their house and you knew their family, you would say, man, they got it all together. What a family. Great kids, great jobs. They live in a great house. But when a kid feels hopeless, all bets are off. So how do we train adults to walk alongside a teen into the knot, and they're willing to walk that distance in that journey? And we have to be in the place at TreeHouse of making some of those beautiful, and I mean this, the beautiful 911 calls, because it's an honor to walk alongside a teen and say, I'm not going to throw you away. I'm not going to give up on you. Oh, I love you. We're going to walk this together. Connect is our large group. We are a Christian organization. So on another night of the week, we'll have a large group. It might look a little bit like a youth group or FCA, but that's just the TreeHouse version. And then TreeHouse Next, that is specifically focused on teens that are saying, I want to do something post-high school. I think it's college, or I think it's 2-year, and maybe it's military. I don't know how to get there. Can you help me? And then we partner teens with a trained volunteer that helps them navigate through the beautiful and horrible world of things like FAFSA and college apps. I mean, you got to navigate that race. So these are typical programs. And then there's other things that we do in terms of retreats and mission and service, et cetera. And then for us, we have 8 measurable goals for teens. Instead of laying them all out, we look at them as internal. And again, that's the truths. How do we get teens to believe different about themselves, believing that that would then turn into external things, such as graduating high school would be one example of one of our external expressions or goals. So TreeHouse, our headquarters is just up 100 in the West End area. So we quote unquote own and operate 11 sites here in the Twin Cities Metro. The most recent is Edina. We utilize space in CPC Church, so it's our staff. We have vans in the parking lot, but the space inside, I mean, that's just, we office there, and that's where our staff operate. And we're 40 years young as a mission, but now we partner with and we train another over 50, nonprofits and churches that are saying, well, how do we do that? Can you train us how to do that? So we are training and we're equipping another 50 sites in 11 other states outside of Minneapolis. And that's our vision. How do we empower and equip adults to walk alongside, help teens realize what is true about themselves so that they can see what is possible? So, Mary, what's next? Am I giving it back to you? Am I answering questions? What am I doing? Yes, gladly.
Any questions for?
Yes.
Distinguished individuals?
Thank you. Great question. When we start up a new TreeHouse community, so we started up Edina, for example, during COVID, not the optimal, obviously. But our first calls are, we want to call the police because we want them to know, hey, we have vans. So here's what we're doing when we drive these 12-passenger vans around the city, and we've got, a bunch of teens in them. And here's, when it says TreeHouse, here's what it means. We talk to the schools. So social workers, guidance counselors, and administrators. I actually first met Bruce with our former CEO of TreeHouse. We met at Bruce's office, and this is probably about 2014. We described who we were, and he said, if that's what you do, I could fill 2 TreeHouses now. How soon could you? Literally, and it was a very serious look in his eyes. So we want to partner with the school, the police, civic organizations, businesses, so that everybody understands, here's what it's not that we're trying to run programs for teens. We want to be a part of the shared resources for teens. So all that to say, the schools actually become our primary referral to support group because they have these growing lists of kids. They know the needs so desperately. And then teens bring teens because they say, wow, this is a little bit different. This is a real vulnerable place. And then teens start to grow the culture themselves.
And schools truly appreciate the help. They just don't have enough staff to manage everything that they're faced with at the counseling level. So it becomes a partnership with the school.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Yes, sir. Where are the other sites? Brooklyn Park, Plymouth, New Hope, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, Edina, Bloomington, Eagan, Lakeville, Matamidi. I think I got them all. So basically, I was just drawing the map right around the ring. Was he? Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Oh, diversion cases. Yeah, we would work in partnership. So it would be, we would want to understand the unique needs of the teens and then just have that good partnership between our staff and your team. Yep. Yes. That's a great question. You know, we actually don't very often, and that's not intentional. So we would certainly kind of similar on a case by case basis. If teens are suggested or referred to us, we would want to work in partnership with the referring adult or agency to make sure, hey, is this a best, I would say not a fit or solution for the teen, complement to the services the teen needs. But not in many cases, so thank you. Oh. This will be the hardest one. It's honestly, most of the hard stories, I sat in on an Egan support group last year. Well, it was right before pre-COVID. Every teen in the room shared, every story was brutal. Every teen was sharing hard emotions. It all went back to the house. Every single case went back to a really hard relationship with mom, and I'm feeling the quiver even in my lips saying it. It's so often it's mom or dad or dysfunction between one, the other, each other. What would you offer there?
Yeah, I would agree. We saw so many kids, as Andy talked about, sometimes in a dyna we think it's together, and it is for the most part, but there are those cases where in relationships with parents, when that goes south, that's the core in that child's life, and they can't count on that anymore. And it just becomes more difficult for them to navigate life when there's dysfunction in that nuclear family.
One more question?
Yeah. Thank you. That's such a good question. So we really instruct our staff. We want them to be experts in being generalists. If that's not counterintuitive, but it's also then know when this is above your pay grade and you need an expert alongside. So we continue to seek those partnerships, whether it's local. There was a great agency in Minnetonka, and we would partner with them specifically if we had teens that needed professional mental health help. And we just brought a new board member onto our board with mental health experience from Dakota County, expertise to help us expand that network, because our staff are not trained. Very few are, that maybe they left the counseling world and came to TreeHouse, but we want more of those partnerships. So if you know or represent an agency, I would love your information. We want that network because, you know, even as Bruce described, it is out of control what has happened in the last 18 months to our kids.
All right. On behalf of Dinah Morningside Rotary Club, will make a contribution to our foundation. So thank you for both being here. And got a little gift for you. Both.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And I'm kind of a simple guy, and so it was a great presentation, but one of the first things I heard was Bruce talking about his 10 years at Edina, and he was building relationships to help make things happen. And I think that's what being a Rotarian is all about, and a lot of things you can take away from working with your friends here, clean up the highway, or any of the other activities. So go out and change the world.